With all these nothing burgers going around, I'm just wondering, how can a brother get some meat and potatoes around here? Winston Churchill had it correct. You can always count on America to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. The same can be said about hyper promoters and even the doomers and gloomers. After they tried everything else, eventually they will get it right. More than 20 years, the discussion of de-dollarization has been a major topic, as some have suggested that it will lead to the imminent demise of the US dollar hegemony. I'm not saying de-dollarization isn't happening, but I don't think it'll happen in our lifetime. Regardless, there always seems like there's something urgent or some narrative being pushed that is used to create some sense of urgency around why we need more metals and why we need it urgently. The latest BRICS summit and a lack of go-back currency brings us to what seems to be the end of another narrative used to create that false sense of urgency. Over the last 2 years in particular, I've heard lots of repetitive theories and reasons to create a sense of urgency, like shortages, the imminent Fed pivot, the BRICS alliance, debt explosion. Again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying these things aren't issues or potential concerns, but they aren't the things that we really need to focus on, at least not in the short term. And even I wonder how much in the long term. As I discussed in my previous video, we have to separate the signal from the noise. The noise is simply another distraction or something used to manipulate you. Think about this. How many times have you heard someone tell you that it was time to back up the truck, or right now is the buying opportunity of a lifetime? Frankly, when it comes to metal, it's always a buying opportunity of a lifetime. But that's for very different reasons. So with nothing really coming out of the BRICS summit, and especially no announcement of a go-back currency, I'm kind of interested in what's next. What's now going to be used as the next new big thing to justify why you must act now while supplies last, like we're watching some 3 a.m. infomercial? That aside, instead I wanted to focus on the real signals and not the noise. Long term, our investment thesis for metals remains completely intact. So the only question is, what now do we focus on? And what now should we do in the short term to get us from where we are today to where we know we will be ultimately in the future? The short-term movements of the markets are always the hardest to predict, while the long-term is easier to forecast and predict, except for when it comes to the timing piece. Understanding this, the research fully supports that we take a dollar cost averaging approach, and I agree that that works for the average investor. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. You, my friend, you are not the average investor. I'm almost 100% certain of this because you're watching this video. While most investors spend 7,000% more time watching TV shows than learning and addressing their financial situation, you're not one of those. Most people are too busy keeping up with the Kardashians than keeping up with their financials. If you and we aren't the average investor, so what does that really mean? It means we have to continue to do things differently if we want different results. And that doesn't mean we have to take on additional risk or anything like that to make lots of money or to have a dramatic impact on our financial situations. In response to a recent video, I got a lot of questions and comments about how much money I make and how much I made in order to have invested what I had over the last few years. Each time I read those comments, I laughed a little because that isn't the point, for two very important reasons. Well, actually three. One, how much I or anyone else makes is not the most important question. It's almost never about how much you make in life. It's about how much you spend. My first job out of college in the late 1990s, I made $16,000 a year, and I felt and lived rich. Why? Well, not because of my salary, but because of my expenses. That job paid for my housing, my food, my utilities, and even my cable bill. And on top of that, I worked less than 5 miles from work. 3 years later, I had more than tripled my salary at my new job, but I was actually broke at the end of each month because I had all these new expenses. This is why every 6 months or so, I do a video where we focus on how to increase your stacking budget without the solution being having to make more money. It's about how do you cut expenses and save more. That is the path to your financial happiness, which will increase your overall happiness. The money won't necessarily make you happier, but it will make you feel less burdened, and that will make a difference in your life. Second, the number I shared was to get clicks. It was accurate, but it was to get clicks. But what really matters is what percentage that number represented of my actual budget. If it was only 10%, well, that's not very impressive. Versus it being 50% of my budget of my income, well, that's far more impressive. Which is the third takeaway I want to offer you. Remember to run your own race. Your stacking is not, let me repeat, is not in comparison to someone else's stacking. You don't know anyone else's story, or as we say in the church, what they had to nail to the cross. And while that's an incorrect metaphor, it is to say you just don't know someone else's trials, tribulations, past, and etc. Which leads me to what now? And frankly, it doesn't matter what now will become the new narrative or crisis that will be pushed to stoke or and try to get a reaction out of you. Let's turn our attention to the signals, the truth, or the facts of what is happening to help us maximize our stacking efforts. I've been very open that I am short-term bullish even as gold has pushed its way back above $1,900 to 1914, with 1910 being a technical support level and 1900 being a psychological support level. And silver, let's just say silver has behaved like a boss this last week. Regardless, this week we have a good amount of economic data coming which will influence prices this week, as well as future Fed policy, even though the odds right now are 80% that we will not see a Fed rate hike. In a nutshell, we have very conflicting data points as metals need weak economic data as a catalyst coming off of the previous 4 weeks of losses. At the same time, the Atlanta Fed revised its third quarter GDP number higher. Let me repeat, higher to 5.8%. That number will absolutely be juxtaposed against Friday's release of August's employment report and non-farm payroll data and the PMI survey. Early in the week, we also need to pay attention to Tuesday's U.S. consumer confidence number, the JOLTS job report. Wednesday, we have ADP private payrolls, preliminary Q1 GDP, and pending home sales. But really keep an eye out for Thursday, because Thursday we get the core PCE numbers, personal income and spending, and weekly jobless claims. At this stage, there should be little doubt that the Fed will maintain interest rates higher for longer, as long as we can continue to pretend that there is healthy economic activity going on along with a tight labor market. So to finally answer this question of what now, well, at the risk of sounding like an episode of Pinky and the Brain, what now? We keep stacking because eventually sound money is going to take over the world again. In the meantime, we ignore the noise and focus on the signals, which aren't about timing the market as much as they are about using the data to help us make purchases, which will help us get the most metals for our money, because that is how we stack smarter. In the comments section, for kicks and giggles, with the BRICS gold-backed currency in the rearview mirror, what do you think will be the next doom and gloom or overhyped topic? What signals do you think we really should be watching? Or simply put an A+ in the comment section so there is no doubt that we always stack smarter and never stop learning.